The Women's Six Nations Show on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, a proud supporter of the Irish women's rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Yes, you're all very welcome along to the Women's Six Nations show here on Off the Ball. We're into the final weekend, and what better way to end it than a Grand Slam decider when England face France on Saturday at 1 p.m. in Twickenham. And also this Saturday, Ireland face Scotland in the final game. That's in Edinburgh at the Dam Health Stadium at 7:30 p.m. I'm delighted to be joined in studio by rugby writer with the Irish Independent, Cian Tracey. How's it going, Cian?
Yeah, how are you?
Good, not too bad, thanks. Great to have you here. And also on the line, we have a former Ireland international, Fiona Hayes. How's it going, Fiona?
I'm good, Aisling. I'm really good.
Good to hear from you. So, Cian, we'll kick off with you. We haven't chatted through the Six Nations with you yet. What have you made so far of the whole campaign?
From an Irish point of view?
Yeah, you can kick us off with that.
Well, I suppose, yeah. Like, where do you start? There's no point in beating around the bush, is there? It's been bitterly disappointing. I think everyone knew coming into it that it was going to be really difficult, but I think the issues like that we've seen were probably worse than what people imagined, and you know, lots of that isn't necessarily down to the fault of the players. It's, you know, the issues that have gone on for the last few years off the pitch. And like, even when I'm writing about it in the paper, I'm always sort of, you know, conscious of pointing that out, because there are people who might listen to this show now, who might read the paper, who aren't aware of those issues. But certainly in the last couple of weeks, I've kind of, you know, decided, like I did a piece a couple of weeks ago, and I think that girls deserve the respect of being kind of analysed in terms of what they're putting forward on the pitch. Can't keep talking about, you know, what's gone on in the past. Well, it's almost not fair on these girls that they're the ones who have to pay the price, and publicly as well. And that's been the big thing. You know, Greg McWilliams has touched on it, Niamh Briggs has touched on it, that, you know, Ireland teams in the past have gone through really tough struggles, but it's been away from the glare of the media, it's been away from the TV cameras and everything that comes with that. But it's a double-edged sword. Like, these girls now have to learn the very, very hard way. But if people like us aren't sitting here, you know, talking about it on a Six Nations designated show, or if we're not writing about it in the paper, then that's not doing justice to the women's game. Because, as I'm sure we'll get into, like, you look at the attendances across the board, like the crowd that's going to be in for the England-France game tomorrow, and also for the Scotland game, they're talking about a record crowd as well. So the women's game is growing. Unfortunately, Ireland have been left behind to a certain extent, but in terms of what we've seen on the pitch, look, there's been a couple of bright sparks, but like, really and truly, when you get into it, there's been some really disappointing performances as well. And I suppose the hope is that they can turn it around this weekend, because I think it is a winnable game. But you wouldn't be overly optimistic, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into all of that as well. But even from the point of view as a rugby writer, you obviously get into that sort of game if you're a fan first, you know, and it must be difficult at times when Ireland are having these results and performances to constantly write about it and be, I suppose, yeah, it's negative at times, but because you have to do your job. Yeah,
and that's the big thing in all this. Like, it goes back to the respect point. If we were writing and talking about this and not actually getting into the nitty gritty and talking about the mistakes that we're seeing on the pitch, we wouldn't be doing our job, but we also wouldn't be fair to the players who are representing their country. So they deserve that, and I think they respect that as well. Like, obviously, in any of the, I don't even want to use the word criticism, but I would say analysis of what we're doing and what we're talking about, none of it is personal, and that applies to the men's game as well. You know, and some players, you know, down through the years could absolutely take, you know, offence to some things you say, and that's fair enough, but none of it is ever personal. And I think we owe it to the girls to analyse what we're seeing on the pitch. You know, there have been slight improvements. You know, we can get into it in terms of the England game, but I think internally as well, and I've no doubt that this is the case, and Fiona would probably have a better insight than me on this, but I would have no doubt that they demand better of themselves. It's okay against the likes of an England and France, because look, we accept that they're on another level, but they did create opportunities in that Italy game, in the France game as well, that they just weren't able to take. So, you know, these girls are putting in a huge amount of work off the pitch, which obviously is going on, you know, we don't get to see that, but the hours that they're putting in are professional hours now. Lots of them are on professional contracts. I know they're not on big money, but they're still putting in a hell of a lot of time that I think we should be seeing a little bit more than what we are in terms of cohesion and things like that. So that's what I mean in terms of, you know, being fair in terms of your analysis. So of course it's disappointing. We'd love to be like writing about an Ireland team chasing a Grand Slam this weekend on the back of what the men did, and like that is a big focus now. It has to be for the IRFU, because the men's side of the house is absolutely flying it. Number 1 ranked team in the world, beating New Zealand last year, winning the Grand Slam. Like, things could not be going better. But like I said, we're seeing how big the game is growing. You look at the World Cup in New Zealand last year, which obviously Ireland had to watch on from afar, and you're seeing the likes of, you know, Scotland, who obviously went to the World Cup instead of Ireland, what that's done in terms of growing the game. They're going to have a record crowd, but also in terms of the cohesion that they've been able to build within the teams. So look, there's lots and lots and lots of issues, and like I said, I do think it's important to point them out, but at some stage we should focus on what we're seeing for the 80 minutes on the pitch, because the amount of work that the players and the coaches as well are putting in behind the scenes, like they merit that, I think.
Yeah, no, it is. It's 100% important to point it out. Fiona, you're in the world of punditry and analysis and all of that stuff now, but when you were back playing for Ireland, did you read the stuff in the papers? Did you take note of it?
No, I suppose, Aisling, when we were back playing, there wasn't very much in the papers, you know, like the corner, if even anything. We'd often laugh about it now when we think about when we'd be trying to look to see even if there was anything written about us in the early days. And that was like 2013, I suppose. Even after the Grand Slam, it still didn't kind of pick up. It was really after that World Cup year in 2014 that we started, especially beating the All Blacks, the women's team there, that things started, the Black Ferns, that the media started to pick up on stuff like that, but still wasn't kind of performance based. I look at it now and I'm almost jealous. I think it's great for the girls. Obviously they'll have their own take on it, but I think it's great that, you know, their line out is being analysed, different areas of the game they're focusing, people know players' names. You're not just talking about back rows, because you're seeing it on the media so much. You know, they're named, and you know there is a really good positive spin on what's not been a very positive year for the girls. And you know, I think Cian has hit the nail on the head. I've gone into a bit of punditry, and I think it was after the Italian or before the Italian game, and I had said, look, I had a line, could we like focus on the rugby? And you know, people didn't take that well, because we know all the struggles that have gone in the background. But I think it's come to the time now where they have to be fixed, and that's fine. But for these girls and their families, if you're talking about it, it's great for them to hear you talking about how they played their game. You know, what needs to improve, what areas would other teams go after, what areas will they go after in other teams. And I think that's how the game has kind of come on so much, is now that we're looking at it, and the media especially focusing in on that in the last couple of weeks in particular, I think.
Yeah, that's a positive in itself. The 2013, Fiona couldn't really find it in the papers, and now we're seeing it everywhere. We have the standalone show. You know, they're the positives that we can take from it. We'll look now at the Ireland-England game. It was 48-0 in the end, Fiona. How do you think the game went? I felt that, you know, Ireland, they fronted up at times. They gave England a bit of a headache.
Yeah, definitely. Look, you know, we talk about these players, and I think this was one of the big physical games. You know, England will look at it as missed chances, but I thought Ireland, their scramble defence was much better. I thought they came up in the line a lot. Now, there were still a load of missed tackles, and that's an area that the defence is going to have to look back at, what systems they're playing. I'm not seeing a clear system myself, but in particular, like heart, aggression, getting in the English face in the breakdown. I saw like Derv, Brittany, all these players were going after it and really trying to slow down English ball. So it came up massively for that. Ireland didn't have much ball inside in the 22, but when they did, Aisling, it was line outs. They won a few penalties and kicked down the line, and unfortunately our line out was not functioning at all. So they have a chance going into Scotland in particular to fix that, because if we can get that going, we haven't seen this backline in attack. We haven't seen them inside in the 22 really going at it. What we've seen is pick and go, short pops from the forwards, and it eventually, after a few phases, it almost breaks down. So I'm excited to see them fix that this week, and let's really go attack Scotland, because the efficiency and accuracy inside in that red zone, inside in that killer zone where you want to score, definitely hasn't been up to scratch.
Yeah, Cian, for you, what did you make of the game? The missed tackles is a big one. It was a big one going into the game, and the line out as well. What is going on with the line out? It's something that really needs to be improved.
Yeah, look, to me it looks like, now to be fair, they actually tried to change it up and they were trying to use Sam Monaghan a little bit more, but in the previous game it was far too predictable. They were just trying to hit Nicola Friday on every ball. Now, look, I would imagine if I was putting myself in their shoes, what they're saying is they're trying to simplify it, but it's too easy for the opposition to read. So I think they need to have more options in the line out. Obviously, a lot of them have gone awry, and it's not all down to the hooker, but a couple of Niamh Jones's throws, I think, as well as she's played in the open field, and I'm sure we'll get on to talk about her, like her defence, and it was the same last year as well, the amount of dominant tackles that she puts in for a girl of her size as well. Like, she packs a serious punch, but you got to get the nuts and bolts of your game right, and for any hooker, the bread and butter is the line out throwing. So I think a few of her throws have just been, they've been crooked. They haven't just been on target, and these are the kind of things I mentioned earlier that I think the players will take responsibility on themselves, that if I'm not performing my role to my best ability, then that's going to spread through the team. So I think the missed tackles has been, look, it's been really disappointing. I think there's been elements, and I agree with what Fiona's saying, there's at times where the defensive system, look, I don't know if it's the defensive system itself or if it's the players within it are just a little bit unsure of their roles in it. At times, like girls not stepping up into the line quick enough and things like that, and allowing space on the edges has been really costly. We saw England go after that a few times last weekend. So look, they're very fixable, and unfortunately, because a lot of these girls haven't had a huge amount of rugby, particularly at this level. You're going to have those kind of mistakes in terms of like trying to build your rugby IP, for want of a better term. And when you're coming up against an England team who are just on another level, you're going to get exposed. And as well as Ireland did, and I agree with Fiona, I don't think their heart and their character and their fight has been in question at all. I mean, you see it every time Nicola Friday is put in front of the TV camera as captain of this team, and I think we forget that she's not exactly the most hugely experienced player either. Like, it's difficult. Like, when you look around that dressing room, it's different to when Fiona played, because that dressing room was just full of leaders, like absolutely full of leaders, where you have players now at the moment are trying to learn on the job, really. So when you have loads of young players coming in, all of a sudden, if you've won, I don't know, 20, 30 caps, all of a sudden you're nearly a veteran, So Linda Dugang is another player who I think would fit into that category. So it's difficult for them as well. But when they're looking back on the reviews and they see the number of missed tackles, I think individuals will recognise that they just have to be better than that. As much as you're learning on the job, this is international rugby, and it's gotta be better. So against an England team and a France team, like I said, their attacks are so good that, not that it's understandable or forgivable, because it shouldn't be. And this is what I mean, we have to hold the team to certain standards, because that's what they'll be doing themselves. But when you're talking about an Italy, a Wales, and certainly in Scotland this weekend, as good as Scotland are going to be, you cannot have as many missed tackles as Ireland have had against the likes of France and England, because if they do, then they're going to cut them apart as well. So you'd imagine they're all fixable issues. It's just a little bit concerning that we're at the fifth game of the campaign and we're still not really seeing it. I think the attack, I agree again with Fiona, they haven't had a huge amount of ball, but I go back to the Italy game, and they created a several try scoring opportunities, which they haven't done in most of the games. And I think there's been a lot made of the sevens players again, and at times I feel like that's an easy out. It's an easy excuse, because if you had a Baving Parsons or an Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe on the wings, it doesn't really matter if they're there, because if the pack is getting beaten up front, then it makes no difference. And that applies to like the men's games at top level, it applies to any level at all. So, but in that game in particular, I thought the couple of chances that created, they really lacked an out-and-out finisher to get them, because I couldn't help but think that a Bavian Parsons or an Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe was going to finish those chances. But look, they're off doing their thing with the sevens, and good luck to them, and fair play to them. Hopefully they get to the Olympics. But I'd like to see more from the back three. I think the centres, the combination in midfield, it's good that we're seeing a bit of continuity now, but I think the balance in midfield has been a bit of an issue as well. So I think they're lacking just that kind of killer instinct when they do put themselves in the positions. But I guess it's easier said than done, because they don't have the ball for a lot of the time, and when they do put themselves into positions, there seems like there's a little bit of panic. When you just require a bit of cool heads, and that comes back to the leadership thing on the pitch. Like, we've got a really young 10, Dana O'Brien, playing, who looks like a really good player, but we're almost expecting too much of her, because, you know, crying. It's similar enough to Ireland in terms of Johnny Sexton's backup. Like, we're crying out for a 10 since Nora Stapleton has retired, and it's almost, it's unfair, I think, the expectations you put on her. But she looks like she's going to be a quality player, but patience is required. So you're just looking around in terms of the attack and where the leadership is coming from, and I think that's been a bit of an issue. Obviously, I'm not out on the pitch, I can hear how vocal the players are being, but I think at times the communication could be better, because I think similarly to the defensive structures, when they're in attack, it's just a little bit difficult to see what kind of shape they're trying to play. They're lacking runners off the ball. I think a really good example of that is like Dervla Nicovard has been really good. Like, and when I saw her going to number 8, I'll admit I did have a couple of concerns, because she's not the biggest in the world, but similar enough to Niamh Jones, because obviously she's been playing in the front row as well at hooker. But God, like Niamh Jones, she packs a serious punch. But when she does make line breaks, there hasn't been enough players supporting her on her shoulder. And that, to me, kind of filters through to the lack of game understanding in terms of like being on your
the awareness.
The awareness, exactly. Like, so, but the fact that Ireland are making those breaks is really encouraging. It's just about, the coaches encouraging whoever it may be just to be on their shoulder to take more advantage, because when they are putting themselves in the try scoring opportunities or even line breaks, they have to make the most of it, because they're working too hard to get them.
They have to be clinical. Like, they have had a lot of possession at times, and they just haven't got over, as Cian said, it's probably not having those finishers. But something with England, they didn't need to look at times. They knew where the players were. The awareness was there. With Ireland, they haven't had the time, I suppose, and the experience with each other to fully have that understanding that, I know they're going to be there. I don't need to look. You get that when more games played. Fiona, for you, did you see any slights of, I suppose, improvements, or what do you think they really need to look on going forward?
I think especially they're going to have more ball this week, obviously, against Scotland. England held on to the ball a lot. The possession wasn't great for Ireland at times. So I think an area I'd like to see a big improvement is that second line of attack. When they set up their system, so if they're going off a ruck or a set piece, you can see they have a second line of attack, and we know clearly there's a couple of dummy options on and it'll happen. But if we go over that 2-phase mark or 3-phase mark, I find Ireland are very slow to set up, into a formation where a defender can't understand where the ball is going. I think we lose our shape after a couple of phases, and it's something I've noticed, especially in the English, it's Italy in particular, but in England, and the couple of times we've had attack, even on turnover ball, we just get very lateral. So what Ireland have tended to do is gone wide, so it's hands. And yes, the space is wide, but we haven't had nobody is holding any of that internal defence in. So what I'd like to see them working on this week, Aisling, is having that second line of attack, and also their dummy runners actually looking like they're getting the ball to hold those defenders in. So we need a bit of more animation from them, or even running a bit flatter on the gain line. Sometimes we're just passing, you have a dummy runner, but the world and their mother, and everyone knows they're a dummy runner, because they're not going to get the ball. So I think I would imagine Greg, and he's especially in attack, when they looked at it this week, will, after a couple of phases, try and get their shape a little bit better than we've seen, because their ball retention has been good at times, but it's actually actually penetrating that gain line and getting over the gain line. And I think by holding defences in, that's what's going to give our back three a little bit more. And I will say last week against England, I really enjoyed some of our back three play. I thought they got involved a little bit more. You had Aoife Doyle coming around the blind, coming in on the other side, and vice versa with Natasha Bean. So they've come into it a little bit. But the problem is we're not giving them the ball in space because we're not holding the defence. So I think they'll be clinical this year or this week if we can hold in the defence and give those girls a little bit space. Lauren Delaney as well, her footwork was really good at times. They earned the few metres they got forward. But I think if we can sort that out, that will actually give them space and we'll see them up and running, and they'll be able to use their footwork maybe after they've gotten over that gain line.
Yeah, and we'll definitely look at England as well in a little bit more detail when we preview their game against France this weekend. But for them, I suppose, they didn't play their best rugby, really, Cian?
No, they didn't, and I suppose that's the sort of the caveat to all of these conversations that we have around, you know, looking at from an Irish point of view. I would say they would be disappointed racking up a big score like that, but they'll still picture that and see loads and loads of areas for improvement. I suppose, like, if maybe it was like, is it tricky for them coming over and there's really no expectation on Ireland to cause an upset at all? Perhaps complacency set in a bit, but I do think we have to give Ireland their credit. They scrambled well. They were better in defence. I use that word kind of warily because, like, better in defence but still conceding that amount of points and that amount of tries. Again, you don't want to be patronising to the team either. Like, so yeah, I would think that they would picture that game and see lots and lots of areas for improvement. Their set piece kind of letting them down at times, and coming into like a Grand Slam decider, it's probably no better preparation really when you think about. I know lots of people were talking about potentially racking up a record score for England last weekend, and if they did, then they could be sailing into this game against France this weekend, maybe with a bit of kind of false pretenses. So I think the manner of the win, obviously they'll be delighted, they'll very much keep their feet on the ground because it's going to be a much tougher test this weekend. But look, they've got so many quality players. I mean, I was over in Welford Road for the game that they played last year, and of course, like, you're looking at it through green tinted glasses, but when you step back and look at it from a neutral point of view, that England team are remarkable to watch. The rugby that they play, you look at the World Cup final last year against the Black Ferns, like, that game was just top class in terms of the rugby that was on show. So while it might seem like Ireland are so far away from that, and again, let's make no mistake about it, they are, it shows you what can be achieved when you have the proper structures in place, the proper investment that's been made by the RFU. And, you know, just Fiona mentioned a point earlier that she mentioned, you know, on one of the punditry gigs that she was doing, that, you know, people weren't too happy that, you know, you're focusing more on the rugby. And every time we're talking about the rugby, that it's not like we're ignoring the issues that are at hand either. But, you know, everyone, like, I think most people who have any passing interest in rugby know the issues in terms of the RFU being left behind compared to their compatriots, but or their competitors, I should say. But what England have done shows what can be done, but unfortunately it's going to take a long time to get there. But if you start smaller and look at what Scotland and Wales have done, and even Italy, you know, they've made drastic improvements in terms of the given players' contracts isn't an automatic cure to mean that everything is okay in the world. But what it does mean is that these girls are in training constantly. I was actually looking at their schedule a couple of weeks ago, their weekly schedule, and it's basically the same as the men's, you know, apart from a couple of tweaks. Like, that's the amount of work that they're putting in terms of analysis, in terms of S&C, in terms of gym work, in terms of, you know, on-field work. So I'm not sure how much work they're going to be able to get done on the pitch this week, because I'd imagine there's a lot of sore bodies after playing that game last weekend, and that's the thing that people forget about as well. But at least those girls who were on the contracts are able now to properly recover. I remember, was it Aoife McDermott last year put up a picture that she was back in work on the Monday. I think it was actually after the England game.
That's right.
And obviously that tweet kind of blew up, but that was a stark reminder of what these girls are going up against, you know. So at least now there's better structures in place. There's a long, long way to go, but it's a start, and that's what I think everyone's been crying out for the last few years. And of course, you know, you can criticise the IRFU for, you know, being left this far behind, absolutely, but things are being put in place now to rectify that. So I think that needs to be acknowledged too. So yeah, like hopefully they can make amends, but like I said, I don't know how much they're going to be getting done on the pitch. I'd say a lot of it will be off the pitch, recovery, you know, doing their video analysis. So yeah, we'll wait and see.
Yeah, and even just on the contracts, like that is the case still for a lot of girls. They're going to work the next day, you know, they all haven't taken the contract, so they're up for work on Monday morning or whatever it is, just like normal. They did become the first team in the Six Nations to prevent England from breaching that 50-point mark. And I know a lot of people, as we mentioned, had said, you know, it could be a 100-point game, so that wasn't the case. Well, Fiona, you might take us through your team of the week.
Oh yeah, my hard task each
week.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I'll start with front row, number 1, Loosehead Leah Bartlett for Scotland. They had a huge win at the weekend, as we know. I've put Niamh Jones in there. I'm sure the line-out throw wasn't great, but you have to just give her kudos for her dominant tackles and just making 79 tackles so far in the tournament, only missing 1. It's huge. She has to be in there, even just her ability around the park. Asaya Calafui is the French loosehead. Now, she's actually not, our tight head, she's not starting for France this week, but she brings such power coming off the bench, and I thought she was very good as well. The French scrum has been uber dominant throughout every game they've played. They'll really put it up to England in that area. Jade Congal-Roberts, I had her at number 8 at the start of the tournament, and she's come back from injury and slipped into the second row for Scotland and was absolutely outstanding and got player of the game. She's such ability with Harlequin she's played, and she's such ability to find space and great in the open field. Really good player, and Ireland will have to watch her next week. Sarah Beckett in second row with England. We saw what damage she done running at Ireland at the weekend. I've gone with Sadia Kaboya at 6 for England. Thought she has really come into this English team in this championship, and in the loose in particular, her footwork around the area, she's getting herself heavily involved, especially with back rows retiring. She's nailing her spot on there. Gail Hermé at 7 was outstanding for France. They fell asleep a little bit in the second half, but in the first half in particular, she ran the show, especially line out time, and got a try for herself as well. Romain Ménager, another player who is on the bench for France this week. I thought she might have started because she was outstanding at the weekend there. She's kind of back on the back of injury, but I think France have a plan and will bring these players on nice and early. Mo Hunt ran the show for England. She's just a player with such ability. She's my number 9 this week. Jessie Tremoulier, how could you not pick her? She was so good. She's one of those classy 10s. We saw her her last game at home and the whole crowd were behind her. She had an absolute super game. She fed off that French crowd and in turn is going to start for France against England this week. Lorenz in one wing and Abby Dow on the other wing, 2 absolute finishers, and have been rocking it up when they've gotten ball in space. Their footwork has been huge to watch. I've done a little cheeky one and I've picked 2 12s, but I'm sure one of them can play 13 if needed. So Merle Smith, it's my first time not having Bernier in my team of the week, but Merle Smith from Scotland was so good in that Italian win. She's just so straight. Her straight line running and ability to hold the defenders were brilliant. And Tatiana Hurd, I thought, was very good against Ireland as well. She really showed that she's getting more and more into this English squad. And then to top it all off, Chloe Rowley is back in again at full back for Scotland. They had just such a win against Italy, and their backs are up. I had to put a few of them in there. I thought their play all game was outstanding, and they'll be delighted after last week.
Yeah, some new faces in there, Fiona, but it's not an easy task, that's for sure. Cian, what did you make of the team?
Yeah, I suppose the thing that jumps out at me is the amount of, like, and this sounds a bit obvious, but the amount of quality players, and this goes back to my point about how much the women's game is growing. Like, you have a serious amount of ballers in that team. You'd almost love to see them playing as a Barbarians team or something like that. But yeah, I thought Ellie Kildunn was very good for England last weekend. I have to say, I thought she was a major threat every time she got the ball. So Fiona, why wasn't she in the team?
I had to go with Scotland. There's too many English in the team every week. I'll give the Scotland had to go after their win. I had to.
Well, that was the other thing that jumped out to me, the amount of Scots in the team, which kind of underlines, I suppose, the threat.
The task we have.
Absolutely. The task that's at hand this weekend, the amount of players. And obviously, Chloe Raleigh at full back, like she was the one who broke Irish hearts a couple of years ago as well. So Ireland don't need to be told twice about the kind of threat that she's going to pose on Saturday night. Yeah,
was there any close calls for you, Fiona?
I suppose there was a couple in the back row in particular. There was another, like you want to include Dervnik de Vard as well. She's such a huge game for Ireland and she gets herself about the place. But just with Menage, she just came back in and was so good. So there was a couple I thought the hooker for England done really well as well. She wouldn't normally start. So like I thought there was a couple of close calls, but I went with this. I take when I think too much about it, I keep chopping and changing. So I went off the cuff this week and went with what I first thought.
Well, fair play. We love it each and every week. So I'll take you through the fixtures then for the weekend. So obviously we have England, France, 1 o'clock in Twickenham on Saturday. Italy and Wales, that's at 4:30. That's in Italy, that game. And then of course Ireland, Scotland at 7:30 on Saturday at the Damhealth Stadium in Edinburgh. The Women's Six Nations show of Vodafone, a proud supporter of the Irish women's rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Right, we will look now at previewing Ireland against, no we won't, we'll do England France first off and then we'll go to Ireland after that. So 1 p.m. on Saturday in Twickenham. I'm excited for this one. Both obviously unbeaten so far. Are you looking forward to this one, Fiona?
Yeah, this is going to be the game of the tournament, as we've said, and a lot of people have said over 50,000 tickets sold. It just shows the level of rugby that we'll see on show. And I'll be honest with you, I think both teams will be disappointed with how they performed in their previous week. France had a win against Wales, but their second half, when it started to rain, they didn't handle the weather conditions at all. And I would imagine they'd be very disappointed in how that second half went. So they'll be looking to improve on that. And then England, we know they've verbalised that out loud. They've said that they didn't play their best rugby in that game against Ireland. So they'll know this is an absolute huge game for them. It's funny, I thought Marley Packer might have been out of this game and that would have had huge consequences. I think England at the breakdown in particular and how they played the game, but she's made a Lazarus miraculous recovery and she's back in that starting team. So it's going to be an exceptionally physical, both sets pieces have been good, except last week maybe England had a couple of mislifts and scrum time. Ireland done well in holding England out as well. So I'm really looking forward to that battle at scrum time because the French are physically bigger and way more, but England's technique is so good, and Sarah Byrne, her scrummaging has just gotten better and better. And I suppose what we have to look at as well, both teams have held a few off and they've had a rest. We know Bourdon was rested, we know England rested a couple of players as well, so there'll be absolute players out there good to go from the start of that game, so it's going to be an absolute cracker.
Yeah, it absolutely will. And just on Marley Packer and prop as well, Hannah Botterman, they both limped off through injury and it looked quite bad that they might be out for a few games, you would have thought, but no, they are confirmed that they're both going to start at Twickenham, so that is great from an English point of view. Cian, they're set to run out in front of more than 53,000 supporters. It's a record number, which says a lot about the game.
It's incredible. Like, really, if you were to get 53,000 people for any game, it would be absolutely remarkable. But Fiona's right. It just shows the game that people are expecting. You'd imagine the French will travel in big numbers as well. And when I was watching the game last weekend, Marley Packer going off, like, what a player she is, by the way. An absolute titan in the back row. And Fiona's right. Like, you'd imagine the breakdown is going to be absolutely crucial to whoever wins. But France have blown a bit hot and cold. Even you think back to their opening game against Italy, wasn't it? They weren't great, like, by any means. So they've kind of been up and down, but I think, like, because of the way the competition is, I don't even think it's almost two-tiered at the moment. I think it's probably three. It's gone to three tiers. I think England and France realistically know that they need to have major off days for them not to be playing each other for a Grand Slam decider. That's why they're playing each other last in terms of the tournament organisers' point of view. I suppose the only surprise is that it's on so early in the day. Now, you can't really, I suppose, complain. They're still getting 53,000 people, but I would have thought, like, if that game was on in the evening, that you might even get a bigger crowd. I think it would deserve it in terms of being the showpiece event, because the title is going to be wrapped up in the early part of the day, and then you have 2 other games on who are just playing for places. So a bit unusual from that sense, but I wouldn't knock it in any way, because clearly they've done something right if they're getting that many people in. So I'll be fascinated to see how it goes. I think England, after losing the World Cup final last year as well, and I think that the hurt that they're carrying from that, they've dominated the Six Nations. So I would find it, I would struggle to see, that's probably doing a disservice to France. I think England will be hot favourites, so particularly at home as well. I think the players they'll recognise the importance of playing at Twickenham in front of that many people as well. And I think the English girls, and to be fair, most of the teams have done the same. I think they really recognise the growth of the game as well, and the responsibility, I guess, that comes with it. Because to be fair, England have been up there with world leaders in terms of growing the game. We've just spoken about it in terms of the systems that they have in place, and that goes for what's on the pitch and off the pitch, because we spoke about kind of not really being able to identify Ireland's attacking structures. When you watch this England team, they're just brilliant to watch. Like I mentioned Eddie Kildun last weekend, getting her involved in the play as much as possible. Simon Middleton has obviously done a fantastic job there over the last few years, so they're going to want to send him out in a high as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. That adds a little bit of an extra edge to it all as well, that it is his last game. Obviously he's been there since 2015, Fiona, and what a coach he's been for them.
Yeah, huge. And I suppose his biggest thing was he might have walked away, I suppose, if England won that World Cup. You never know. That could have been he would have been able to draw a line in the sand, but he's obviously stayed on for this year's Six Nations, and he's been even just watching him this year, he's changed. Everyone went, your maul is good, you've a good scrum, you've a good set piece, but he's kind of changed thing up in games where he's gone to his backline a lot more. He's tried to change up that style, although be it in Six Nations competitions it worked, and at times in the World Cup it worked, but it shows the sign of a good coach. Even though at times you can maul a team up the pitch, I thought that with HSN, especially at 10, they're demanding more of their backline, and we saw a lot more of their backline, and with Scarrett out and a lot of injured players, I thought they've come up trumps as well. They're showing a lot of innovativeness inside in those centre pairings when they've changed them up, and their back three just have been electric, no matter who they were. Abby Dow, Claude MacDonald, I think they've all been in a team in my week at some stage. So look, he's a type of coach that has looked at things and is trying to change things. Even though he's leaving this year, he didn't just leave his stamp and what he had got England excellent at playing. He's changed it up, and he hopes to leave them with a Six Nations title, I suppose, and in a much better place playing rugby.
That's I think the key to all of this. Like when Fiona kind of rattles off the players that England are missing, and talking about France, resting players last weekend with this in mind, that's where the women's game is at the moment, that they have this incredible strength and depth, and that's what every other team needs to aspire to. There's been conversations about Leinster, the men's team, over the last few weeks about their spending power and all this, but it's up to everyone else to get to that level rather than trying to get everyone to drop down to that level. So while England and France might be way out on their own in terms of the Six Nations, we don't want them coming back to the pack. We want the pack coming up to them, because we want the game to keep growing. So it's remarkable really, because like I said, Fiona's rattling off players that aren't playing, but England haven't really missed a beat. You'd have to say, okay, that wasn't their best performance last weekend, but the fact they're able to fit these different players in and out of different positions is a sign of the strength in them, but also the sign of the coaching that they have. And it's a really good point that Fiona made. I'd imagine if they did win the World Cup, Simon Middleton, there's no better way to bow out of the game. But and he's nothing left to prove in the Six Nations as a coach either. So the fact that he wanted to have another crack, I think, speaks volumes for it, because it'd be nice for him to go out in a win. It'll be very interesting to see what he does next as well. He's clearly built up an unbelievable reputation, and it'd be worth following to see where he goes. Yeah,
it definitely will. And something we haven't even mentioned, not only is it 53,000 people and two of the best teams in the game going at it for a Grand Slam, the Sugar Babes are playing at half time.
Maybe that's why the crowd is so big.
Yeah. all jokes aside, it's great that they're putting on such a spectacle, and they're putting money into it, and it's obviously a brilliant day out, and it'll only grow the game. Fiona, are you a fan of the Sugar Babes?
I wouldn't be a huge fan now, but I'd say after a couple of beers I'd dance away to a few songs now.
Anything goes then.
Anything goes. Yeah, look, I just think, sometimes to get people in to watch, you might have to invest in a little bit more and make it such a spectacle. But once they start watching, and especially games like this, England and France, I know that I've become addicted to rugby from a very young age just by watching it and wanting to learn about it. So I think to put the money in and make these big spectacles and have obviously 53,000 fans there, but even drawing more people to the game, it'll just make it bigger and bigger, and that's what needs to be done. And hopefully people fall in love with the game, and then it can just be a show then as it is.
Yeah, grow from there.
And that's not just in the women's game as well. It's worth pointing out that it's not a novelty factor like let's get the Sugar Babes to play, because was it 2 weeks ago or last week, I think it was the Kaiser Chiefs played for the Harlequins men's game. So, and actually I remember a good few years ago I went to a Premiership game as a fan. It must have been Harlequins and Saracens, I'd imagine. It was on in Wembley, and I'm pretty sure, I'm going to say Busted maybe were playing or something.
Nice.
Like that.
Nice.
So it's not just, I think it's important to no comment on the bus thing is moving swiftly past that, but I think it's important to point out that some people could look at that and go, oh, the Sugar Babes are playing at the women's game, but this is something that the RFU have done to try and push the game, to try and get a few more bums on seats. So it's happening across the board.
It's a great thing.
Who would we get at the Aviva, I suppose?
I know, yeah, who would you have? Oh my
surely
God.
Bewitched, surely.
They're number one for sure. Great call, Fiona. Right, well, we'll quickly just look at Ireland Scotland then. 7:30 in the Dam Health Stadium in Edinburgh. So Fiona, this is a massive opportunity for Ireland to get their win.
Yeah, look, it's a huge opportunity. Scotland obviously are on a very positive high from their win against Italy. They've looked at Ireland, they'll be looking at Ireland and thinking what areas they can attack, and they'll go after their maul was excellent against Italy, so I think it's definitely an area they're going to focus on, because we know Ireland's maul defence has been kind of good at times, but then at other times it's just split open, and their decision making in whether to go up in the line out or not to go up defensively has been kind of an Achilles heel for them as well. But look, I think it's a huge opportunity. Nobody really expects them to win. There isn't a lot of pressure on to not finish with the wooden spoon. You're probably looking at I think Italy will get some sort of point out of Wales, but you're probably looking at 4 tries and beating Scotland by 32 points. I think it's something like that. So they're not going to be looking at it as a case of finishing last. But what is very important for this team is that they can finish on a win and build themselves up a little bit, and it's continuously going forward then on from there. The players I've seen throughout the championship, I've seen the majority of them playing AIL or Premiership or when I was coaching with Munster in the Interpros. I know they have more in the tank. I know there is definitely a lot more in them in attack, and I'm just waiting for something to click and they can get that attack going. And this, I think, really could be the game if they get one try, and it's a nicely scored try. I think, other than TMO or powered over close to the line, I think that'll give them a little confidence boost, and they're lacking that confidence around that try line, or that ability to let go and really attack inside the 22, because they're nervous of the errors. But I feel like if they get one try, we could possibly see 2, 3 or 4.
Yeah, Cian, whatever the results at the weekend, it's important to sort of build that confidence at this point.
Yeah, look, no player ever wants to finish the Six Nations campaign with no points or no wins to their name. So I think they will be feeling a little bit of pressure, I think, in that regard. They're all proud players. I mean, no matter what level you're playing at, you don't want to have that kind of record to your name. And also it has ramifications, obviously, for the WXV tournament that's going to take place later this year. And I know, I've heard Fiona speaking about it over the last couple of weeks, that the reality is that they could end up in WXV3, which would be, as tough it would be, maybe it's what they need to build from the ground up. But if they were able to get a win this weekend, it would be absolutely massive going forward. And Fiona speaks about the attack, and I totally agree with her, but I just wonder if Ireland were to, let's say, to get a kickable penalty inside the 22, should they take the points, and just get points on the board, because like that's obviously been a massive issue as well. We can talk about them running in 4 tries if we want, but I think even the psychological boost of getting points on the board, particularly early, would be absolutely massive. We've seen how good of a kicker Dana O'Brien is, so I think that's something that they might focus on as well. But look, I think Fiona is right as well, and she sees a lot more of these girls than I do, particularly in the AIL. There's definitely more within them, and this goes back to the very first point that I made. I think internally that they will expect a lot more of them, because of themselves, because they know they're better than they've shown, really. So what I'd like to see is more from the attack. I mean, Fiona touched on the wingers earlier, Natasha Behan and Aoife Doyle. I'd like to see them get involved in the play a little bit more. We see it for Ireland. Andy Farrell said he doesn't like his wingers to be tidy, and you see that in James Lowe and Mac Hansen. They're constantly coming in off their wing, looking to get on the ball, looking to make things happen. I'd love to see that from this team as well, because like Aoife Doyle was on the 7 circuit not that long ago. Like, she has a lot more to offer, I think, than what we're seeing. It's obviously an unchanged team. I think that's encouraging, because they probably have lacked a little bit of continuity. There's been chopping and changing. I know injuries played a part in that, but it's nice to see these combinations blossoming. Like, you've got a player like Dorothy Wall now to come off the bench, and she's a player, when she broke onto the scene a couple of years ago, like, I was going, wow, what an athlete. Like, we don't produce too many athletes like this in Ireland, just the pure raw aggression of her. And she probably hasn't kicked on, if I'm being honest, to the kind of levels I certainly thought, and from people I was speaking to, thought she was capable of. Now, she's still very, very, very young, but I think she's the type of player that I think it's up to the coaches to try and get more out of her. So we spoke about England's strength and depth and France's strength and depth. To have a player like that to come off the bench, hopefully against a tiring Scottish defence, could be important. But it all starts up front, really, doesn't it? The breakdown has got to be good. I think that the pillar defence has been a bit of an issue at times. They've got to watch for those breaks. Fiona touched on Jade Conkle. What she offers is huge. She's now playing in the second row. We mentioned Chloe Raleigh. We all know what she's capable of, having seen what she did in Parma. But this Ireland team, are more than capable as well. This isn't if we were talking about the England game, we were all kind of this fear of dread. This is not. There's nothing really to fear from this game. And I was in Belfast last year when they beat this Scotland team, so I know they've improved. They went to the World Cup, and that's been massive for their confidence in terms of them building cohesion. But this isn't a game for Ireland to fear. And I think if it sounds simple, but if they can do the basics well, just stop missing so many tackles, which sounds simple, but it's just the individual's responsibility, they'll give themselves every chance. Because like I said, this Scotland team, they got their win last weekend, but they're not the world beaters that the likes of an England or France are.
No, it's a real opportunity. We're very much looking forward to it at the weekend. Thanks for joining us today. So it's Ireland take on Scotland in Edinburgh at 7:30pm on Saturday, with England and France battling it out for the Grand Slam at 1pm in Twickenham. My thanks to Fiona Hayes and Cian Tracey for joining me today, and to all our contributors over the last few weeks. Also thanks to Stephen Kisby Green on digital, Ciara and Ken on vision mixing, and our producer Catherine Murphy for keeping the show on the road. We've enjoyed it, and we hope you have too. We'll see you next time.
The Women's Six Nations Show on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, a proud supporter of the Irish women's rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.